Welcome to Macon Memories. I'm Lynda Wright at Randolph-Macon College. Today is November 5th, 2014, and I'm here today with Mary Neal, Director of Financial Aid at the college. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised and went to school?
Certainly, Linda, and thank you for having me. I was born in a little town in North Carolina called Edgecombe County. And I'm one of 9 children. And my family lived in North Carolina until I was a year. And then we moved to Newport News, where my dad got a job on the shipyard there. And then after about 4 or 5 years, we moved to Washington, D.C., because he got a job working in D.C. And so that's where all of my elementary, junior high, high school, and as it turns out, college took place in Washington, D.C. So I attended Catholic University in 1969 and graduated in 4 years.
And you graduated in 69?
Graduated in 73.
73, okay.
High school was, I graduated from high school in 69, college, undergraduate in 73, and really enjoyed it. I attended Catholic University because they gave me the most financial aid, which is pretty ironic, isn't it, that I'm now working in financial aid. But I really enjoyed being at Catholic University and being a student. And I lived on campus, even though it was in my hometown and not very far from where I lived. And unfortunately, in my second year, my mom passed away. And a lot of my younger siblings were still at home. And so on weekends, I would come home and check on them and do things for them and things that my dad needed doing. I actually taught my dad how to balance his checkbook because he had never done that. My mom had always done taking care of all the finances, and so I had to teach him how to do that because I would always say to him, well, during the week, I'm at college. And of course, my older brother and my older sister had already moved out of the house, and so I was the next oldest at home, and he was dependent on me to help him with different things. And so, I taught him how to balance his checkbook, how to stay within his means.
And you're still teaching people
and
that?
I'm still teaching people. Again, I think it's ironic that I was headed towards the career that I'm in right now, but we had a lot of fun times. My siblings, my college roommates. We had a great time.
What did you major in college?
I majored in American history.
Oh, very good.
And my initial goal was to go to law school, and because my siblings always teased me that I like to argue. And so, but in the meantime, I got married. And so that kind of changed plans for me. And so I decided I would... I was really at a loss at that point as to what I was going to do. And it turns out that the spring that I graduated, and I was working as a student in the financial aid and admissions offices because when I started, those 2 offices were combined. They, at some point, separated them and asked me which office I wanted to stay with. And so I went with financial aid. And the lady that I was working with was the director of scholarships. And so she gave me a job. I was her secretary. And while I decided what I was going to do when I grew up. And she decided, after a year, she was going to law school. And so she recommended me for her job. And so I took on the job as director of scholarships.
Wow.
And so in the course of that job, I found myself doing a lot of counseling with families. And I decided at that point that I would get my master's degree in counseling. And so that's what I did.
At Catholic?
At Catholic University because I was able to get the tuition remission. And so that's what I did. And fell in love with financial aid at that point. It was later that the university combined scholarships and all of the other financial aid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to learn all about the federal rules and the state rules and regulations and all of those programs. So I had a more comprehensive view of and more experience with the entire field of financial aid. And so and I've been in it since then.
Wow. So really, your whole career you've been in
I've
financial
been
aid
in
and
financial
counseling.
aid.
Then that's very interesting. So then you were at Catholic and you were thriving there. How did you happen to come to Randolph-Macon?
Well, I left Catholic and took a job as the coordinator of financial aid at George Mason University. And I was there, I guess, about a year and a half when and of course this was during the days when we didn't have the internet. And so a job ad came across my desk for a director of financial aid at Randolph-Macon College. And I thought, this sounds interesting. But I had no idea where Ashland, Virginia was.
Right.
And so I pulled out a map, and they said, "Oh, near Richmond." I'm like, "Oh, okay, Richmond." At the time, I had an aunt who lived in Richmond, and so when we set up the interview, and my husband and I drove down, I recognized the sign off of 95 because whenever we would visit our grandparents in North Carolina, I always remember that because that was always before the Belvedere Toll Plaza.
Right. Oh, right.
Which
I
is no
remember
longer
that.
there, of course. Yeah. And so Chad Nelson, who was the Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at the time, interviewed me. And actually, when the ad came across my desk, it was past the date of applications. I called, and he said, "Yes, we're still taking applications." So I submitted my resume. Got a call from him a couple of days later, and he said, "Yes, we want to interview you." And so we came down, met Chad. He was the nicest person you'd ever want to meet. And it turns out that lots of people at the college were were nice. I met students. I met other administrators. I met the president, who was Liddell Payne at the time. And everybody was just wonderful. The interesting thing about that interview was that nobody knew anything about financial aid. So while I hopefully answered their questions, they couldn't answer my questions because the previous director had already left, and so the college at the time, one of our board members was Robert Atwell, and he was the president of the American Council on Education, and they had offices in D.C., and so he had a tremendous interest in financial aid because he used to be a college president, and he had always been trying to get the board and the college administrators here to pay more attention to financial aid. And it turns out he was right. He was ahead of his time. But the college felt confident that he would be able to ask me questions about financial aid and help them better determine whether or not I would be, if I knew what I was talking about in terms of financial aid. And so I had the interview with Mr. Atwell, and that went very well. And he was not afraid to answer my questions that I had about coming further south. I was living in Northern Virginia, and my family and I had some difficulties from a racial point of view. There were people who burned crosses on our lawns and wrote all kinds of racial slurs on our garages and in our neighborhood, and so I had some concerns about coming further south because I didn't want to have to contend with more of that. And so his comment to me was that although the college has a long way to go in terms of diversifying the campus, not just from the point of view of students and administrators, but particularly administrators in key positions. And he said that he thought that the college was working in the right direction, and he did not believe that I would have any difficulty. I mean, he couldn't answer that question about where I lived.
Right.
But in terms of the college environment, he didn't think that that would be a problem. And I have not had any problems with just some minor kinds of things. You know, people calling up thinking that I sounded white, and then when they met me, they were a little taken aback. But I guess they caught themselves and didn't embarrass themselves. But you know, I don't think in those terms, and those things don't bother me. But I haven't personally had a problem with racial injustice or instances at the college. And I have seen the college make the effort to increase its diversity. Initially, they were trying to increase the number of minority students, and the president would have me on various committees to get my opinion about how best we can do that. You know, and I made suggestions for things like, well, to get students are going to feel comfortable if they see faculty members, if they see people in the career service, because that was what the office was called at the time, career services, or admissions, in those key student activity areas. Students are going to feel more comfortable. And when I talk to students, some students voiced their concern that there weren't a lot of minority students on campus, and I said, well, you know, here's the thing with that is that somebody has to be willing to start. In order to get more students, some students have to be here and stay here. And the more students who are here, the more students will be attracted to stay here. And so, and the college did. Over the years that I've been here, we've had minority admissions personnel, people in the student affairs area as well. And I'm not sure about the career services, but there were some other areas as well. And so, and more faculty as well. Not as many as they probably should have, because as I mentioned during the holiday talk, when I came, Charlotte Fitzgerald, who was a professor in sociology, and unfortunately has passed away, but she was the only African American faculty member at the time, and but we've gotten some more since that time. Yeah, so.
That is a growing point, and I know the college would like to. That's one area the college would like to really see diversity grow. That's our weakest part, I think. But the student body has certainly changed a lot since you came in 1984. Is that correct? Right. Well, getting back to your, I'm trying to decide whether we should just continue talking about that, or go chronologically to when you came. Well, let's talk about that as far as financial aid goes. Were you able to use your role as director of financial aid to encourage more students of color on campus? Was that a priority that the college made as far as financial aid decisions made to increase minority population by using financial aid as a tool, or was that not?
Well, in general, having enough financial aid is always a problem for schools like Randolph-Macon, where we're heavily dependent on tuition revenues. There's always going to be more student financial need than there are resources. But the college did offer to attract, one of the things we did from the financial aid point of view to attract more diversity was to offer a diversity grant. Well, actually, let me go back. We offered a minority scholarship initially. It has since changed to a diversity grant because the minority scholarship initially was offered to African American students. The diversity grant is now offered to any student of ethnic background. But because one of our key enrollment goals is also attracting the best students from an academic point of view, we limit that grant to students of high academic quality who are also diverse ethnically. So that's how that award has changed over the years. But the college's commitment to helping to enroll more minority students has it's something that has changed over the years, and the college has been committed to that.
And I don't know about this year's freshman class, but I think last year's freshman class was almost 1/3 minority student, and so I know that was was one of the highest achieving academically classes that we'd have ever had, and the largest, and so there was a lot of targets had been reached. So I know that's been a lot of good hard work.
Absolutely. One of the other things that we've done is, because the college knows that a number of our students, a great percentage of our students, are from low-income families, our packaging goal has increased over the years, meaning we're meeting more financial need. We're offering larger academic scholarships, and so to the general population. And so as a result, a minority student who is from low-income family, because we are meeting more of the need, we're offering more academic scholarships, they're getting a better financial aid package now than they would have gotten early on. And so that is what has also helped us attract minority students to the campus.
Very good. Well, you touched on this a little bit when you talked about Chad Nelson, but can you talk about any other role models or mentors or people when you made the decision to come here? Who were some of the people you worked with that were
well, John Conkright was the director of admissions when I started, and so when Chad left, he became the dean of admission and financial aid. So I continued to get to know John better and work with him. I really have been blessed in my employment here at the college to have the immediate supervisors who have been just wonderful. They've allowed me to do my thing, to use my talents, and I mean, they still, expect accountability, and question me when people are questioning them,
right?
Which is perfectly okay and expected. But I've enjoyed working with the people that I've worked with. From Chad Nelson to now David Lassane, John Conkright, and Stephen Nape in between. So
very good.
It's been great.
Well, that's great. We have had a very good team, I think, in admissions, at least in the time I've been here too.
But I did, in terms of mentors, I really enjoyed working, not directly with, but with Charlotte. When she was here, Charlotte Fitzgerald. I mean, we would have lunch, we would talk. We would talk about, student issues or whatever the case may be, and even talking about how to get more minority students on campus. And she would share with me what was happening on the faculty front to try to attract more diversity on the faculty side. And so I just enjoyed my conversations with her.
People speak so highly of her, and she was a real trailblazer and advocate, and really she was a great asset. It was such a shame that she died while she was still teaching here, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, that was a big loss.
Yes. I believe she had diabetes, juvenile diabetes. Yes. And I remember one instance when I knew she was suffering and having some real difficulties, to the point to where it affected her eyesight. And then one day, I was walking from my car to my office, and I saw her drive by in a car. She was driving.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wait a minute.
She can't
be driving. So I called her and left a message. Call me. She called me back, and I said, Charlotte, did I just see you drive by? She said, yes, I did. She had surgery on her eyes that allowed them to help restore her sight.
Wonderful.
So it was amazing.
That's great. Let's see. I'm sorry, it looks like we have covered some of these things and I've jumped around a little bit. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about just the changes in the financial financial aid industry or business since you've started in it? I know um, tuition costs have gone up so dramatically and so steeply in the past 30 years, and college needs and have changed so much. Do you want to talk about how you've seen that change here?
When I started, and even at the other colleges that I worked at, most of the financial aid was awarded on the basis of, at that time, it was the FAF. Now it's the FAFSA,
Mm-hmm.
and based on a family's ability to pay. So based on financial need.
Mm-hmm.
And colleges, as did we, offered a handful of academic awards. But most of the dollars were based on financial need, and we would try to meet a percentage of a student's financial need until all the dollars were awarded. And colleges like Randolph-Macon were struggling to meet enrollment goals. And so we called in a consultant, an enrollment management consultant, who helped us understand that you could really use financial aid as a recruitment tool. And that's one of the things that Mr. Etwell had been advocating for years and years and years. And so the college entered that tuition leveraging is what it's known as in the marketplace, and we went into that with the expectation that after we severely changed the product that students and parents would, pay to come, because we would just be such a wonderful educational institution that people would pay. But here's the thing: when you create a monster, it's hard to put him back in his cage. And so colleges all over the United States are using tuition leveraging models, using financial aid as a tool to help them recruit
Right.
and retain students. And so that's what we're doing right now. We use and as we have been for the last 10 or 15 years, a model, a packaging model where we incorporating our merit awards as well as the percentage of need that we're able to meet, combining it into a total package that we send to the students to hopefully give them a financial aid package that will help them decide that they can afford our costs. And our message along with that, even before they get their financial aid package, the admissions office is sending the message that you can afford Randolph-Macon. The question is, do you want to afford Randolph-Macon? Do you like the product you see? Do you like a small class size? Do you like our geographic area where we're 2 hours from anywhere, from the beach, from the mountains, from D.C.,
Right.
and all those advantages that come with those. I mean, we're in a prime geographic location, despite the fact that we've got some great public institutions in our backyard. But there's a college for everybody, and not everybody wants to be at a large institution. Some like and prefer to be in a classroom with a smaller size. They don't want to be in a classroom with 600 or 700 students.
Right.
And with the classes being taught by a TA,
Right.
as opposed to the professor. And professors who do extraordinary research in addition to teaching, with teaching being their primary responsibility. Do you like our facilities? Do you like the dormitories? Do you like the athletic facilities that we have? All of those things, no matter how much money you offer someone, do you like our majors? All of those things, no matter how much money we offer someone, it ultimately is the bottom line that the family and the student has to answer. These are the things that we think is worth it.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about education, you don't really know whether it's worth it until years out.
Right. Right.
You can look at a brand new Mercedes and go, oh, yeah, that's worth it.
Yeah.
It's going to be worth the money, the $50,000
Right.
they want me to pay for it. Despite the fact that the dealer isn't giving you a scholarship,
Yeah.
isn't giving you a low interest student loan with 10 years to repay it, isn't offering you necessarily a monthly payment plan that the dealer is managing. You'll have to get a loan
Yeah.
from someone else if you have to do that.
Yeah.
But the nature of the purchase and the thought that goes into how I'm going to financing it is the same as education.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes we in our society we don't think of education that way, and primarily because the product is not tangible.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard for people to see 4-5 years away from graduation that yes, this was worth the money that I had to spend, including having to repay the loans that helped me finance that education. So we spend a great deal of time helping families understand that. Our admissions folks do that when they're on the road and talking to families. All of our publications and materials that we send out to families have that affordability message, because what we want families to do is to look at all of their options. We don't just want them to go to our webpage and look at how much we cost and deciding, oh no, I can't afford it. Not without exploring the college and all it has in relationship to what you think you want out of life, which is hard for a 17-year-old to have to do and have to contemplate when all they're thinking about is, am I going to pass my next math test? But those are some pretty weighty questions that families have to entertain, and so. But we want them to explore all of their options before and have all the information at their fingertips before they make a decision about whether or not they want to afford. And you notice I distinguish between wanting to afford and being able to afford, because many of us can afford. It's how we spend our money, which is our choice, how we spend our money. And so, do we want to afford it? Do we want to spend $20,000-$30,000 at a private liberal arts education as opposed to $15,000 at a public institution, a public university? That's choice. That's choice. We make it affordable with the financial aid that we offer. Last year, we administered a $43 million financial aid program.
Wow.
Now, when I came, we were administering maybe $6 million in financial aid. You see how it has grown? More and more families not only qualify for financial aid, but we're also offering more non-need-based financial aid awards. Our academic scholarships, for example, being our largest non-need-based scholarship program. But that's what our admissions people, that's their message to our prospective students. We also, the financial aid staff goes out to the communities, to the schools and other community groups like churches and civic organizations, where we conduct financial aid seminars on helping families understand how the entire financing of college works. And we try to, I prefer to meet with groups as young as possible, even elementary schools, to convince families that their best source for financing college is themselves, saving and planning for college. And the earlier you get started on that, the better. Because, yes, there will be federal dollars, there will be state dollars, there will be college dollars, but there's no guarantee
that all that will be
there in the level that you're going to need it, with budget cuts and things of that nature that take place with all of those entities. You will at least have the dollars you have.
Right.
If you're saving, and you don't necessarily have to save for every penny of what college is going to cost, but you need to save something,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to start.
Mm-hmm. That's why those state 529
The
plans are so
529
good.
plans
Yeah.
are wonderful, and more families should take advantage of them.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And they do. I know they do start that advertising quite young, which is good when
They
you
do.
need it.
They do.
Well, can you remember what the tuition cost was at Randolph-Macon when you came? Because the
I don't remember exactly, but it might be in the $4,000 range. That's for the year.
right, right.
And tuition right now is 35,000. So that's quite an increase.
It is, and I think just college tuition relative to the average income has increased so much. You know, back, I don't know what the average income in 1984 was, but I think that the just the percentage of tuition versus income is a lot higher now than it was then.
Absolutely. But I do know that over the years, the college is our administrators have been very conscious of that fact.
Right, right.
And so we've kept our increases, our annual increases, relatively low in comparison to inflation. So we've tried to keep that in mind. But the other message that we try to get across to policymakers, federal and state, federal in particular, and when I say we, I mean the higher education community, is that we're not, as a group, gouging families in terms of our costs. We're not just increasing costs because we can. We have fixed costs. I mean, we have to pay our light bill.
Yeah.
we have to
right.
Pay for heating. We have to maintain our buildings. And there are federal regulations for certain buildings. I mean, our science facilities, there are certain regulations we have to adhere to, and that costs, the feds don't give us money to remain in compliance.
Right.
And so if tuition is your revenue, in order for you to take care of those operating costs, then you may have to make sure you've got the revenue as best you can without the educational product suffering, because we also have to maintain the faculty, quality faculty. You had to pay me. So, we're not just gouging families. There is a cost to everything.
Right. Well, very good. Well, you mentioned something about buildings just then, and while you're here, I did want to ask about the different buildings where you worked on campus. When you started, where was admissions and financial aid?
When I started, the admissions and financial aid offices were in separate buildings.
Oh.
And every president who've been here since I started wanted the two offices in the same physical space. But because of where the offices were, there wasn't enough space to house us all. The admissions office was in Thomas Branch before the Thomas Branch renovation, long before the renovation. And the financial aid office was in the Mabry House, upstairs in the Mabry House, because the downstairs Mabry House was being occupied by the Ashland District of the United Methodist Church.
Oh, okay.
And then they moved out, and financial aid took over the entire building in Mabry House, which is next door to campus safety. And then the admissions office moved, because Thomas Branch became unlivable, moved over to Neville House, which now houses the Hack.
Okay, right.
And the admissions, and for a while, financial aid was still in the Mabry House, and admissions was in Neville House. And so families had to shuttle families
back and forth,
passing the library and to get over to the admissions office. And there were times when we would go over to the admissions office to meet with families, especially those who were, in wheelchairs or in crutches, had a difficult time getting around. So we would go over to the admissions office to meet with those families. Then the financial aid office was moved next door to Neville House in the honors house, which was, I believe, called the Panel House. But it was being housed by, or housing the honors student in the honors program. And so we moved there. Mrs. Panel still maintained the library of her husband's books in that building. And so it was a lot easier for admissions and financial aid to go back and forth.
Right next door, right.
Right next door. And then we managed, after the Thomas, by now, the Thomas branch had its renovation, which housed career and counseling and a bunch of other offices. But of course, with the upstairs still being dormitory space. And so then President Lindgren was able to get finally get the admissions and financial aid offices in one space. And so that's what we're currently in, Thomas Branch, first floor.
That's good, and that's a lovely space. And it's a nice waiting area. It's a nice building to show off for
families. Love it.
Yeah, prospective students, and I think that's been a good move.
Absolutely, and it's been great with us being under the same roof, because it's just a matter of walking a few feet as opposed to walking all the way across campus or even outside to go, next door for families to come see us. So it's
really worked together.
It's been wonderful.
Good. Well, I want to change the subject just for a little bit and see if you could talk a little bit about your experience working as a college ombudsman. You've been one, not obviously specifics, but just that's a real honor that you are one of the 3, I believe, ombuds at the college.
1 of 3, that's correct.
And that's just a level of trust and respect there to be selected as that. Can you just talk about that, what's involved and how that came about?
Sure, and you understand that I can't be.
I know
I can't talk in detail.
Right, exactly. That's all confidential, but
isn't
just
necessarily discreet.
Yes.
But it is an honor to have been asked to represent the staff. Although I've seen students as well, but primarily staff members who feel like they need somebody to talk to help them work through whatever difficulty they might be having. It has been a real honor and a real eye opener for me, and it has helped fulfill my lawyer need, if I can put it that way. A lot of what I do is education, and so my teacher instincts kick in every now and then to help the employee understand not only their rights, but also their responsibilities. Sometimes people like rights, but they don't want to hear about responsibilities.
Right.
And I think we're all like that, but it has been a real honor for me to help the college in that way. And I hope that I'm serving folks well, and that they understand more all the things they need to with regard to employee-employer relationships. So, and I've met with not just employees, but employers as well, to help educate and hopefully help them understand what their roles and responsibilities are too.
Well, I think you summed it up nicely when you said a lot of it's education, but your counseling background, I'm sure, comes in very handy in that too. Just
absolutely, because sometimes people just want and need to have someone listen. And so listening is a big part of counseling, and it's not me telling them what to do. It's me listening to what they're saying, their need to have someone listen and understand, and being an objective person in the situation, I can talk to them about what I see of the situation from the point of view of an employer as well as an employee. And very often people are like, oh, really? I didn't understand that would be. Yes, that's just something to think about.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I do. I enjoy doing that.
Good. And I'm sure you're good at it, and I think that is a real honor. So I did want to mention that. Well, can you tell me what you see when you look over your 30 years at Randolph-Macon? What are some of the watershed events in the life of the college since you've been here?
Gosh, there's been a lot, but I think probably one of the most would be the transformation of our physical space, our campus. And even, in the early days, I can remember President Payne walking around campus picking up trash off the because he was always cognizant of the fact that there would be prospective students and parents walking around who wanted the campus to be nice. But of course, physical plant takes care of that, and they do a wonderful job with that. It always amazes me when we have special events, how beautiful the campus is, and when they're, especially graduation, I'm always impressed when commencement comes around and they've set up all those white chairs and the tents and all of that. I mean, it's just, and all the landscaping, the different flowers that they plant around, and the trees and the bushes that they have. It's just, and it's not just in one particular spot, but all over the campus.
They have so much to maintain.
It's beautiful. And then with all of the newest buildings that we have, I mean, that's been the transformation that I've seen from when I started back in the 80s till now. The renovation of the existing dormitories that we had, plus the new dormitories, culminating with the latest one with the senior dorm. But the Brock Commons is an outstanding and impressive building, inside and out. And so I can understand why the college continues to take pictures of that building to show in all of our publications and on the website, because it is very impressive. Now, I have not yet toured the newest dorm, but I do plan to get over there so I can take a look at that as well. But the pictures that I saw on the website as it was being built, I was thinking to myself, I want to be a student again. Yeah. So I can live in the. We didn't have dormitories
we
like
didn't
that
have apartment.
when I was in
No, we
college.
didn't either.
No. So the students ought to consider themselves very, very fortunate to have those buildings, the access to those buildings, and just Brock. The building,
the Brock Center.
The Brock Center was not here when I came, and so students had the old gym for working out, which wasn't a lot. Yeah, and so the college has been very fortunate with its donors to help us build those buildings,
and that the staff can take advantage of that too is really a wonderful perk.
Although it's sometimes hard to fight the students for the track and the equipment, but but yes, you're right. We do have access to that.
Well, what have been some of your most satisfying experiences since you've been at Randolph-Macon?
I think I just the knowledge that I'm helping families and students in particular, help realize their dreams. There are always going to be some families and students who are difficult to work with, but I think for the most part, our families and our students are just wonderful. They're very courteous. They're thankful when you put forth the least little effort to explain things to them. I think that's been and continues to be the most rewarding thing for me. It's just knowing that I play a role, as backseat as it is, which is fine with me. Yeah. In helping them achieve their goals. Yeah. Yes.
That must be very gratifying.
Absolutely, no question.
Well, speaking of that, Mary, you used to have as a quotation at the end of your signature, your email signature, that I thought was so meaningful. And I know you mentioned it in your talk you gave at the holiday dinner last year. So I'd like you to read it and then just talk a little bit about um, why you put that as your signature and what that meant for you.
Okay, this quote is from Aristotle, and it reads, "To give away money is an easy matter, and in any man's power, but to decide to whom to give it, and how large, and when, and for what purpose, and how, is neither in every man's power, nor an easy matter." This quote caught my attention because it sums up my role and responsibilities and financial aid. It is, and I know families don't understand the amount of time and the effort that we put into actually reviewing their applications and their situations, particularly those families who write to us and let us know about different varying circumstances that are affecting their lives, whether they be financial circumstances or not. We take all of those circumstances very seriously. And even though we're in a high-tech world where a lot of our award decisions and packages are automated, the one thing that is not automated is our actual reading of those circumstances and contemplating them and figuring out how they will impact the family's ability to pay for college and therefore ultimately end up in what their aid eligibility is going to be. That is time consuming. It is sometimes stressful. It is sometimes, and as you might imagine, for somebody with a counseling background, it's heartwarming and it's very difficult not to want to wrap your arms around everybody with their circumstances and say, "Here, take the money."
Right.
But you can't do that. And this quote helps me summarize the fact that although we get more and more families who are eligible for financial aid, it is difficult for us to, it's not easy for us to always decide how much money to give when the resources are limited.
Right.
And the resources are always limited. And that's what makes it so difficult. And I think you have to have a certain amount of empathy and a certain amount of compassion to be able to make the decisions that you think are going to help those families who are experiencing the most difficult situations, even when those circumstances don't necessarily show up on a standardized form. You know, you have to look beyond that. And that takes it's an art, and it takes experience. The Mary Neal financial aid officer in the 80s was nowhere near the aid officer of 2014, and she has learned a lot. And Aristotle captured my sentiments exactly.
Very well said. Well, are there any other memories or stories about Randolph-Macon which you'd like to share with us today?
I think the students who come to Randolph-Macon, the new students who come, they don't know yet how special the people are at Randolph-Macon. And I think if you've talked with graduates of Randolph-Macon, and even some of those students who attended but didn't graduate, would say to you, it's the people who really make this place, and it really makes it special. When I came that first day for my interview, when I met Chad, I said to my husband after my interview that this place fits me like a glove. And that feeling has not changed. And so the people is what makes it special and continues to make it special, a special place to work for me. When we were in Mabry House and in the Panel House, those really were houses, which became homes, physically became homes. And so it made it even more of a home-like environment for us to work. And so using the word work wasn't really apropos. And even being in a building now, it still there's a very homey feeling about being at Randolph-Macon, and that is not a bad connotation. That's good in every sense of the word, because it makes you feel comfortable. It makes you feel like I don't have a problem getting up in the mornings and going to work. Now, everybody's going to have a bad day every now and then, but for the most part, I really enjoy coming to work.
Well, that is wonderful, and that really shows in your demeanor and everything you've shared with us today. And I want to thank you so much for coming in and speaking with us with Making Memories.
It was my pleasure, and thank you for asking me.